I'd like to begin by acknowledging the vital support we receive from our local councillor, Desley Simpson, and the Auckland Council, and in particular through the Oraki Local Board, which has ensured that we can continue and even expand our program of work despite tight financial times in Auckland. Taking this opportunity, I'd like to especially acknowledge board member Margaret Voice, who has given so much of her private time to join our monthly management committee meetings, attend trap handout events, and generally support not only ours, but all ecological projects in the Oraki ward area. We were incorporated as a registered society on the 16th of August 2017, so we're now over 4 years old. Our activities depend on the patronage of the Oraki Local Board for most of our funding, with a balance of other funds received from Auckland Council tied to specific activities. We direct this funding towards regular trap handout events, possum control, conducting regular bird counts, monitoring of predators, and increasingly raising awareness about the need to control invasive plant species, and in parallel, the need to encourage native flora to support safe bird feeding and reproduction. Our financial year mirrors that of our ultimate funder, the Auckland City Council. In the year to the end of June 2021, we spent a total of $109,000 on activities. This was an increase of 27% over the previous financial year. This relative increase reflects the subdued activity in the first 2 quarters of the last financial year due to COVID restrictions on our public-facing activities. This year, we've stepped up our hours on direct possum control, our work in conjunction with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei on their land, support work in the Kaumaramara Valley Forest, and initiating a new predator monitoring program throughout our area. In the 2020 financial year, we underspent due to COVID. This year, we have attempted to catch up, not only by the above measures, but also by hosting trap handouts in new places, still within the Oraki Local Board area, but outside our traditional East Coast facing emphasis. This year, we had no major capital expenses on plant and equipment, as the previous purchase of the trailer served us well and didn't require maintenance other than cleaning, etc. We did expand the number of billboards from the initial 4 to a total of 10. And I'd like to acknowledge that all the necessary expense was borne in kind by our loyal sponsor, Barfoot and Thompson, and their local agent, Aaron Voss. The number of our paid contractors has remained constant through the year, the only change being the appointment of Michelle Brinsden as project coordinator upon the resignation of Jelana Robertson. Michelle came to us with both academic and practical experience. We first met when she kindly presented to us on the subject of New Zealand native bats as part of a spring series of public talks we hosted last year. Under Michelle's management, we've been able to reach out to new goals and insights into monitoring and predator control in our territory. Hours worked by possum specialist Edward Duff have increased through the year by virtue of his renewed emphasis on rat and possum trapping on mana whenua, as well as public and private land throughout the Eastern Bays. Without Edward, we would only be a shadow of the presence we currently have in the community every week. Taking this opportunity on behalf of the Management Committee of the Eastern Bay Songbird Project, I wish to thank our outgoing Treasurer, Andrew Robertson, for preparing the accounts and for all his valued support during the year. I'm pleased to use this occasion to announce that the position has been filled by Kit Parkinson, who many of you will know well from his time as chair of the Oraki Local Board and involvement in several other community and environmental organizations. As a working group, the Management Committee values diversity in skill and perspectives, and it's all the greater for it. We welcome expressions of interest from members and stakeholders who wish to join and contribute at the committee level. We need and can use all kinds of people. You can reach us through our website or by contacting secretary@songbird.org.nz. We hold free trap handout events on the first and third Saturdays of every month, rotating the venue throughout the Eastern Bays area. We make use of the trailer as a mobile billboard to highlight the next event, and it's often surrounded by interested families during a handout, or at least it was pre-lockdown. Ahead of each event, we print flyers and do letterbox drops to hundreds of houses in the immediate neighbourhoods. These are delivered by a roster of volunteers who I'd like to publicly thank for their ongoing commitment. Experience has shown that as much as people may be turned off by junk mail, and despite our use of social media, these letterbox drops remain vital to trigger local level response. Whenever we engage with the public, we're met with universal support, interest, and many shared experiences and questions about trapping, bait, and predator behavior. Recently, this kind of local level activity has been documented as part of the excellent local Fight for the Wild TV series made in New Zealand and all about local conservation efforts. It's available for viewing on YouTube and via Radio New Zealand's website. I commend to all members if you haven't already seen it. Still on the subject of communication, this year we've also been fortunate to receive support at the committee level from Jan Power, a skilled writer who's penned several stories covering local songbird and related events, such as the Manakai Dawn opening ceremony, all of which can be viewed on our website. Jan's skilled minute-taking is also much appreciated at our meetings, including documenting this AGM online, which isn't easy. Our endeavour over the past 4 years owes much to the foresight of our founders, in particular, John LaRoche and John Lawrence, but several other founder members are still actively involved, including Thomas Berger, who is even now managing this Zoom facility and who has so ably led our website and many other initiatives. Francis Battersby, who's tirelessly driven the Kohi Valley Forest Initiative, Martin Heffer from the Poriwa Valley Group, and Alan Minson from the Auckland East Men's Shed, which has now constructed and delivered thousands of rat trap tunnels, weta condos, and possum platforms to both ours and the Howitt Group. Michelle will soon provide you with a detailed report of our activities, and Kit will summarize our accounts. But suffice it to say that as a group, we're in a good position, both financially and in terms of capability, to continue and expand our scope of work in terms of trapping, monitoring, and geographical coverage. We sincerely hope that the residents of the Eastern Bays and wider Oraki local board area will see this in terms of numbers and diversity of bird life, particularly native. Later, we'll hear from Professor Rachel Fuster, whose work with the leading statistical tool Catch IT is the backbone of our data registration and analysis. Her scope is nationwide, but we're so fortunate to have her as a local resident and that she's willing to return to our AGM yet again to provide us with an update. I wish it could be in person, but to Rachel, I also want to express a big thank you on behalf of the group, and if I may, on behalf of groups like ours all over New Zealand. With that, I'll conclude my report from the chair and move on to the housekeeping matters related to approving the minutes of meetings. Firstly, last year's AGM also held under lockdown via Zoom. I move that the minutes be adopted as a true and correct record of the annual general meeting held on the 9th of September 2020. Do I have a seconder for the motion from a member of the Eastern Bay Songbird Project? Indicate by, if you could indicate it by a hand wave on Zoom. And we'll need to, Kit, I see Kit I saw first. Kit has seconded that. The first one I saw, Michelle also did it, but Kit did it. Thank you. So I'll note that seconded by Kit. And moving on. Secondly, for the most recent Management Committee meeting held on August 11th, 2021, I also move that the minutes be adopted as a true and correct record. Do I have a seconder for the motion from a member of the Management Committee of the Eastern Bay Songbird Project? Could indicate by a hand wave. Martin Heffers waved his hand, so I'll put Martin as the seconder for that. Thank you. With those formalities concluded, I'll now hand over to Michelle for her report as project coordinator.
Thank you. I will just share my screen. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, Michelle.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for joining us tonight. And yeah, it would have been nice to be in person, but anyway, we are here. I just wanted to introduce myself to people who don't know me. So my name is Michelle Brinston and I am the project coordinator for Eastern Bay Songbird. If you need to get in contact with me, please use either of those emails, coordinator or Michelle at Songbird. So tonight I'm just going to talk to you briefly about some of our achievements this year with our pest control monitoring and the ecological corridors, and also some of our plans going forward into the future. So as Mark highlighted, we are an incorporated society formed back in 2017, just for those of you who aren't familiar with our project, and we are largely funded by Ōrākei Local Board and Auckland Council. Some of the people that we employ part-time, myself for coordination. We also have Edward, who's our trapping expert, and Turfa, who has been working hard with our data management and also helps out with social media and advertising events. We also have Jonathan, who manages our volunteers, and a few other people in the background doing lots of different things. I just wanted to highlight that the purpose of our society, the main function was to help facilitate the community and not necessarily carry out the work ourselves. So we really wanted to focus on getting people involved in the project from the beginning. So again, just to highlight our project area, it spans about 1,400 hectares and covers the suburbs of Ōrākei, Mission Bay, Kohimarama, St Heliers and Glendowie. And we have approximately 35,000 residents in our area, and it's largely made up of urban housing. So like Mark has highlighted, one of our main aims was to help create a pest-free environment. And one of the ways that we've been able to do this is largely get our name and our logo known in the community. So this has been highlighted with the use of the 10 billboards, which have been strategically placed around our neighbourhood. And this has helped people to identify who we are and to get them involved with the project. And with the help of the trailer, we can place it around the neighbourhood and bring traps to people, making it easier for people to get involved with trapping in their backyards. So overall, we wanted to achieve a 1 in 4 households trapping in their backyards, which was approximately 3,500 households in our area. So as you can see, we've given out over 2,000 traps now, and we had a really great year in 2019 where we managed to give out 820 traps for that year. Now, unfortunately, last year, due to COVID and probably again this year, our numbers were quite a lot lower. but hopefully we'll still continue once we're down to level 2 to give out traps. So this map indicates where the traps are located around our project area. So you can see we have quite a good coverage now of people actively trapping in their backyards, and we are up to about 1 in 6 households. And later on this year, we're hoping to achieve 1 in 5. So the yellow dots indicate where the traps are located, and the red area is a 50-metre buffer around that trap. So we have all these traps out there, but how do we know if we're actually making any difference? So with the use of Catch IT, which Rachel is going to talk a bit more about, we can see where activity is happening in our project zone. So the darker the dot, the more activity has been recorded. So it gives us a good idea of what we've caught over the years. And throughout our project duration, you can see we've got some pretty hefty numbers there, nearly 4,000 rats, 967 possums. I'm sure we'll get up to 1,000 possums this year. But this year alone, we've managed to trap 226 possums through the efforts of our volunteers and, of course, Edward and other people. So it's really important to see that geographically how we're actually doing. So we've also been able to implement our monitoring plan this year, which has been a really great achievement. And so we have set up 11 monitoring lines throughout the zone. And this is on both public and private land, areas that have been trapped with or had active pest control, and areas that haven't. And we've also put a few lines outside our original project area just to see what's happening. And we've been using tracking cards, wax tags, and chew cards. And this has helped us to monitor for pests in the area. So far we've carried out two monitoring campaigns in May and again in July. And it helps us to build a picture of what we're seeing across the project area. And we're just really looking at the top 4 predators at the moment. And you can see that rats are pretty prominent still in most areas. But you can see possum activity creeping up there in the peach colour. But you can also see in areas that there's been trapping going on for a long time now in Whenua Rangatira, Porewa Valley. We're not picking up any possum activity. So this is really good news. So it's really important for us to keep up this monitoring, and we can focus our future effort in different areas. So we've also been carrying out our 5-minute bird counts for a number of years now, and this map highlights the different locations that people have been participating in the bird count monitoring. So we have 39 backyards and 25 reserves that are participating in our bird monitoring, and this is carried out twice a year in May and then again in October. It's a really good way for people to participate in our project that don't necessarily want to get involved in trapping or might not be very mobile. It's something that they can do from their backyard. So it's a nice activity for people to participate in. Now, what we're finding sort of consistently is that we've got more native species in our reserves than in our backyards. And our most common species are sparrow, blackbird, and tui. We're also finding other birds, but those are our top 3. And this could be because of habitat and food resources in the reserves, but we're not so sure. This is something that we're going to be looking more into in the future. And we've just started to use another database system called TrapNZ to have a look at our bird monitoring over time. So we can put our data into this platform, and we can create heat maps of where we're seeing bird activity that aligns with our bird monitoring. So we've only put a small part of our data into this system, but this will be continuing, and then we can get a good picture geographically over time what's happening with the birds in our areas. Now, we've had some quite exciting news. In the last bird count, we had 2 sightings of korimako in our project zone, so that's quite an amazing sightings in our area. So hopefully we'll see more of those popping up in the future. So we can also look at different species. You know, if we want to look at some of our really important species that are good seed dispersers, we've got the silvereye and the kiruru, and we can see where those birds are popping up in relation to where people are monitoring. So this is going to be a really good tool going forward into the future. We're also starting to monitor weta in the area, and we have set up 15 weta condos throughout the zone. And this is something that we hope to get schools involved with monitoring the weta. It's something fun that they can do. It's very easy, and most of the weta condos are set up in places that are easy to get to. So weta monitoring has been a great addition because we haven't looked at invertebrate abundance before, and weta are often known as an indicator species, as they are often preyed upon by rats and possums as well. So it's nice to have this part in our monitoring program. So last year we had this amazing report from Kerry released, Ecological Corridors. And if you haven't read it, please go to our website and there's a PDF link to it. So make sure you check that out. Some really great work. And you know, this was aimed at helping the Songbird Project identify priority areas for restoration and enhancement. And as you can see, this map from the report shows existing forest fragments in the dark green. In the middle colour green where existing corridors were, and then the lighter green were proposed corridors where we could start to enhance areas. So the bellbirds in the top of the picture represent birds coming from the offshore islands back to the mainland, and this was a really big motivation for the Songbird Project to go ahead in the first place. So we're starting to implement this plan into our strategy, and like Mark talked about before, Kowi Valley Forest, and there has been some attention over the years, but we've really started to focus on this area over the last year, and we have identified it as a significant forest fragment in our project zone, and it has many great native trees and native birds, and there's also fish, native fish in the stream that runs through right down to Kowi Beach. It is largely piped, some of it, but it is open through Kowi Forest, Kowi Valley Forest. But there's a lot of problems with this forest fragment with weeds and sediment, which we've been trying to deal with. So some of the weeds that have been taking over this area have almost caused a ecosystem collapse. We had really huge amounts of a weed called Elaeagnus, which is a vine, and we were really starting to see the impacts of it collapsing trees and really taking over. And we were also seeing abundance of ginger just absolutely covering the forest floor, so there was no hope for seedlings to start to establish. So we've had amazing work from Edward and Turfa and some of the volunteers, and of course Francis, who have been working really hard in there, and they have almost eradicated ginger from that whole area. So it's a pretty amazing effort from them. We also managed to get some additional funding this year through the Eastern Bays Wildlink Fund, and we purchased 1,500 plants from the Porewa nursery, and those were all planted this season. So that is going to be great. Part of our monitoring plan as well is to set up some photo points, which we'll monitor over time. We've also been carrying out our outreach and education program. This has been a little bit slow over the last couple of years, just due to COVID again, where schools were a bit limited with time that they could allow for external people to come in and give talks. However, we have a really nice program now that we can roll out for the students. And this is a talk that I gave at Victoria Ave Primary School. They were doing a project on increasing backyard bird life, and they were really interested in how they can do that and how they can help out with pest control. And they're also designing some signs to go out into the public areas later on this year. So we've also had a strategy review this year, which we had a public meeting. We invited members of local volunteer conservation groups to come along, and we had a really good uptake of different people from our community, and we asked people to comment on our strategy at the moment and ideas for going forward into the future. So this is a work in progress. We're still collecting all of this information from this evening, and we are writing our plan, which is going to be our plan for the next 3 years going forward. So going forward into the future, we have decided to extend our trap handouts to other areas, and we have already started in Remuera. We've had a lot of great feedback from people in Remuera that are really happy to come along and sign up and become a member and start trapping in their backyards. We're also going to be starting in Meadowbank and St John's, and we've just recently, in the last couple of weeks, received some funding from the Mangakeke Tamaki local board to start extending our trap handouts into Glenanis and Waitaki Bay in Point England. So this is quite exciting because we are finding that there is reinvasion of possums, especially into the songbird zone. So this is actually going to complement our project. The more people that we can get trapping in their backyards and in public spaces, the better. And we hear about great success in Waitaki Bay with the group there, and so I feel this is going to also complement their project, getting people in the backyards, trapping around those reserve areas and as much around the Tamaki River as possible. So we're also really trying to up our trapping effort and placing more automated traps around the zone. So we have now a number of 80-20s, and we've just received a few more to put out into the community, and also working with the companies, giving them information on how the traps are doing, as these are still being largely kind of experimented on and new methods being proposed. We're also getting a lot of information about raising traps off the ground, and the success rate seems to be going up, especially with possums and ship rats. So we're going to be trying to raise as many of our possum and rat traps off the ground, and with help through the men's shed, they've been creating these platforms that we're giving away with the rat traps and the possum traps as well. So we're also going to be working closer with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. They have gone through a major restructure in the last couple of months, and we're really excited to start working with them again, carrying on some of the work that we're doing in the Parua Valley and Whenua Rangatira, but we're also working with them to get more traps in backyards in Ōrākei, and this is going to be a really targeted trap handout campaign run by Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. So really excited about that. So we're also looking at training for people, working with the Auckland Council and Sarah Peters, who's the Community Conservation Ranger, and getting people trapping in public spaces. So we've had a lot of people respond to our ask for volunteers and keen to take up trapping in public areas. So we want to make sure that all of those areas are really getting some good attention, and we're trying to minimise those pests in those larger areas. We're also wanting to help out with other volunteer groups in our area and share our resources and knowledge as much as we can, and also start to implement the ecological corridors report and identifying some more areas that we can start work on. Yeah, so we have a lot to do, but it's really great to have everyone on board. And I just want to give a special thanks to our sponsors. Thanks so much to the local board in Auckland Council, and also Mangakiki Tamaki local board for coming on board. And Menstead, of course, they're our biggest supporters. They're always keeping up with our orders and giving us a good price. And you know, like Mark mentioned, Aaron Foss has been really supportive at keeping our billboards up nice and proud in the community. We've had a few incidents of graffiti and a few destroyed over the time, and they have been back up and prominent in the community with the help from Aaron Foss and his business. And also Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei for continued support as well. And thanks to Edward, especially for all your hard work and enthusiasm, or the data management. Thanks very much. Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. And I'd like to ask Kit Parkinson to make a few comments at the moment on the role of the Treasurer.
Hi, I will keep this nice and short. I can see that I'm getting a bit of buffering in this. So for the year ending the 21st of June, June 2001, we've had a grant and membership income of $87,581. And most of that has come from the Ōrākei local board. Thank you very much. Our outgoings have been $108,720. So we actually spent $21,000 more than we had coming in. But last year we spent $29,000 less. This is a runover from COVID, as has been explained. Our volunteer and trapping expenses have increased from $63,000 to $87,000, which is about a $24,000 increase, which is 33%. So we're putting a lot more effort into that area. We currently have $60,000 in the bank, $5,000 due to us in GST, and of course our beautiful trailer worth $6,900. So we're in a great position for continued growth. We've had a clean review of the accounts for the year, and the accounts will be, a copy of the accounts and the performance report will be put up on the Incorporated Society's website, or as is standard at the end of each year, or you could, if you do want a full copy of them, you can go to the secretary at songbird.org.nz and we'll send you out a copy of those. In closing, I'd like to thank Andrew for all the work he did in the last year, which is amazing. For the last 18 months, he's got us into a very good position for tracking the grants, so we know exactly where we're spending them. And I'd like to remove the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kit. Now I'll just move on to the subject of.
A seconder for the report for the.
Oh yeah, so you're moving that the financial report be accepted by the group. Okay.
And we
I'll
need
second. I'll second it. Okay. Okay. With that concluded, I'll just move on to the election of the officers. Now, this would be my nightmare to conduct under Zoom instead of being face to face, but the Constitution of the Society provides for the election of the core officers at the time of the AGM. That's the chair, the treasurer, and the secretary. If we wish to, we can amend this by a vote at the time of the AGM, but at this occasion, we've got no such request. The opportunity to provide nominations was widely circulated to members a month in advance, and then again when we were obliged to transfer from a face-to-face meeting to one held by Zoom. Despite this, we received only a low number of nominations this year. Whether that's good or bad, we have 3 nominations mapping to the 3 open positions. So I deem that no voting is necessary at this Zoom AGM. The 3 successful nominations, therefore, are Chair, myself, Mark Booth, in continuation from the previous year, Treasurer, Kit Parkinson, who you've just heard from, and Secretary, Judy Stitchbury, also a continuation last year. So I wish to thank Judy and Kit for their willingness to contribute in these functions. Now I'll pass the screen to Scott Milne to say a few words on behalf of the Oraki Local Board. Scott? Thomas, you might need to unmute Scott. You there, Thomas?
I am there, but
Scott's under DS Milne.
Wonderful. How's that?
yes.
Okay, that's great.
Look, I totally agree with the mute button. I think it would be fabulous to have at local board meetings. I want to start as you did, Mark. I've just hit my timer. I am going to keep to time, but I want to start like you did, Mark, with thank yous. And I hope I'm putting you on the spot, but you're the top of the list. The way this organisation is chaired is paramount to its success. The continued professionalism and the enthusiasm and just the overall management of the group is one of the major factors to its success. I also want to, again, like you, thank our councillor Desley Simpson. As community, you don't realise just how lucky we are to have the hardest working, the most intelligent councillor among the 21 on the governing body. She works harder than anyone else and is a constant advocate for everything that we do in our local board area. Des, it is a privilege and a delight to work with you. I've also got a number of my board members here tonight, Troy Elliott, Mark Voice and Sarah Powery, and it's interesting that they're here sort of in person because they probably have the greatest passion, like me, amongst the board for what we're doing in Eastern Songboards. That's not to say that the others aren't interested, that's not true. Across the board, we really applaud this organisation. So I do thank them, though, for their encouragement and support of you and of me as chair. It would also be fitting for me to say thank you to Barfoot and Thompson because, again, you guys are constantly stepping up to the plate. Given that I've been asked to talk briefly about the local board, I could talk to you about what's on tomorrow's agenda. curbside rubbish collections, development contributions, public trading and events, and AT parking strategy and age concern. Now, I think I could probably get most of you to sleep within the next 8 minutes. Instead, I'm going to concentrate on the Pariwa Valley because it will be of most interest to you as a group, but also I think will indicate how inextricably linked the two organisations are. The Pariwa Valley Integrated Plan was adopted by our board a year ago this month, and it had in it 7 aims. And as I go through them, I want you to think about how many relate to the Eastern Songbirds project. Those 7 goals were to engage major landowners in the volunteer community to drive ecological improvement throughout the valley. They were to connect people to the valley and connect ecological improvements, contributing to biodiversity. They were to share a common set of information on which to base decisions. They were to monitor, advocate, and improve water quality in the valley, to enhance habitats, improve fauna populations and diversity, and to control pest plants and eliminate pest animals within the catchment, and finally to monitor baseline water quality, habitat quality, and species diversity. Each one of those 7 aims, I feel Eastern Songbirds has a part to play in. And we're extremely grateful for the work that you've done alongside us in the valley, and of course in your own way. Now, over the last year, there's been a lot of progress in the development and implementation of the Pariwa Valley Integrated Plan. First of all, Ngāti Whātua gifted a name, the Ngā Kaitaki Hapori o Pariwa, and this really is te reo for guardians of the valley. And we're very fortunate to have this group of highly talented, enthusiastic people, including a number of representatives from Eastern Songbirds, who are going to set up the processes and the systems around which we will implement the Pariwa Valley Integrated Plan. Our job as a board, like it is to help you at Songbirds, our job is to help fund this. And we used $50,000 out of our discretionary income in the 1920 year to get things started. And that money was spent with Recreation Solutions. Ben Sheeran, I keep wanting to call him Ed Sheeran, but it's Ben and Matt from Recreation Solutions, who have got us started with developing the plan. And Recreation Solutions have helped coordinate Ngā Kaitaki Hapori o Pariwa, the Guardians group. The priorities that they worked on in the last year have been to appoint a field officer. Now, to do that, like you guys understand, you need money. And we have successfully applied for a grant, again, helped by Desley from the Environmental Targeted Rate. And we have managed to secure $54,000 funding for the next 2 years. And that money will be used primarily to appoint a field officer. And that field officer will deliver annual events and the plan that is set down by the Guardians and a governing body of some sort. Now, as an indication of the level of trust and cooperation between the local board and yourselves, Eastern Songbirds were used or volunteered to be the recipients of that funding as the pass-through point, because we hadn't established the group who would work in the valley. So again, we thank you for that, but it is also a measure of the regard that we as a local board hold you in, that we would trust you with that funding and that task. So I'm pleased to say that the Guardians group met in August, I think it was. They had secured that funding. And on the 10th of August, they unanimously decided to appoint Turfa Chowdhury as their field officer. Now, as you've heard already, Turfa is currently in a part-time role with Eastern Songbirds, and this work in the Valley will complement the work that she will do with you. She is highly qualified. In fact, I took a note. In 2017, she completed her postgraduate diploma in biosecurity and conservation. This followed on from her graduate diploma in statistics, and earlier a BSc with an ecology major. So we are delighted, Turfa, to have you on board, and I hope that Eastern Songbirds is delighted that you're going to be even more embedded into the community. I'm just keeping an eye on my time, and I promise you I'm nearly at the end of it. Turfa's got a really busy job. She has a detailed job description, and there are a couple of key projects which the Guardians Group and the field officer will work on in the next year, particularly a wayfinding strategy. This is to work out the maximising the routes and tracks through the valley, and also a comms plan. We don't want to just be an organisation that sends out emails and posts on social media. We want to communicate the vision and the mission of the Parewa Valley Integrated Plan to the wider community for something that's going to last 10, 20, 30, 50 years, way past John Lawrence and the John LaRoches of this world. We want their grandchildren to be enjoying this. And it's really interesting when I see that map that was put up by Michelle before with the red and the green and all of the work that you as a group have done on the northern side of Parewa Valley and are now working into the southern side. We commit to help you grow that area because right through the middle of those two pictures is Parewa Valley itself. There is a marvelous opportunity for us to really develop one of the largest urban forests in the country to be something that the entire nation is proud of. That's what we're aiming for. Just as I finish, I want to encourage you in your level 4 lockdown walking exercise routines to go and walk in the valley and have a look at stage 2 of the Glen Innes to Tamaki Drive shared pathway. You might think at the moment that it looks like a flyover going between France and France and Switzerland. It is a massive piece of infrastructure. But with your help, we will replant and we will revegetate and we will get access for people to go through and around that marvelous walking track. And it is something that the community and the city is going to be incredibly proud of. But go and have a look at it if you can. I'm right on my 10 minutes. I'm more than happy to take questions either in the sidebar or afterwards. And as I said before, you've got some really talented board members listening in on this conversation too. So please, if you have questions now or at any stage, don't hesitate to use the chat bar. Thank you all for your amazing commitment to our local board area. It is a privilege to work with and for you. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Scott. It's quite humbling, very humbling, and I think we can all agree that Scott's a fantastic champion for our local community. I've been keeping an eye in the meantime on the chat function on the side, and there's plenty of congratulations for Turfa there. I haven't caught any so far. I haven't caught any questions that I would regard as any other business for the annual general meeting. I'm just reading the last 2 comments now. So I think I can conclude that we don't have any other matters to conclude. And with that, I'll close the official section of the annual general meeting for the record, and I'll call on Rachel Fuster, who I can see is waiting online now to give us your presentation on the latest rat statistics.
Thank you very much, Mark. And, kia ora, everybody. Can you see and hear me okay? Great, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here again tonight. It's lovely to see everybody's friendly faces. It's a pity that we're not there together in the same room. I do hope everybody's keeping safe and well and enjoying a little bit of exercise around the Eastern Bays, as other people have said. And a big thanks to the committee. And I totally agree with the comments that have been made about this committee being such a crack squad. It's been a real pleasure to work with you all, and I hope it's going to continue for a good time to come. So yes, the latest statistics. So I've had to spend all day practicing saying that word, so I've got it off pat now. So here we go. This is the Eastern Bay Songbird Project, which is, as you know, it's on a meteoric rise and has been for the last 4 years. Now, I'm going to give a little bit of the history in terms of how the project has grown. And I'm going to show all of the results combined with the valued partners of the project that have been mentioned already tonight. So the Mission Bay and Kohima Residents Association, especially led by Alan Minson and colleagues, and the Whenua Rangatira Bastion Point project by Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, because I think these all these projects are working very closely together, and I think they're all indicative of our brave new world, where predator-free New Zealand is going to occur through community powers. So this is about residents getting out into the community and making things better on their local patch. And as mentioned, it's my local patch as well. So I'm really happy to be living here in Kohima, just up the road from most of you. So here we are in Fortress Eastern Bays, and we are very well protected by the looks of things. Each one of these yellow dots is a trap or a bait station, and we have over 2,800 of them out there protecting us from nasty little creatures with teeth and claws as we speak. This is actually a map similar to the one that Michelle showed earlier, but Michelle gave a very modest 50-meter buffer around each trap. And I decided to be a bit less modest and put 100 meters circle around each trap, just to see what happens. And what you discover is that nearly everywhere in this region is within 100 meters of a device set by either the Eastern Bay Songbird Project or one of its partners, which I think is actually an extraordinary achievement. You can also see by this exactly how much protected area you have if we consider that within 100 meters of every device, and these are active devices, I should say, if you consider that within 100 meters of each device is a protected area in some sense, then our total protected area is about 1,500 hectares. And I think you should know that that is a larger conservation sanctuary than Codfish Island. So I'm confidently expecting the Department of Conservation to be in touch, looking for homes for kakapo any moment now, and seeing this as the obvious place to put them. It's about the same size as Motutapu Island. So it's actually a very significant area of conservation estate. Now, I'm going to show how the traps have grown. I'm just going to see if I can, yes. So I'm just going to show how the trap placement has grown since 2017. So this is going to be a motion picture. I hope you've all got your popcorn ready. And as the cursor goes along the top, you'll see this is the change of date. So we're going to start in about October 2017. So that was just a month or two after the incorporation of the project. And as you can see, there were some things already in place at that point. But as the cursor goes along the top, you'll see how things changed. So let me see if I can get that running. So we start in 2017 and things are happening very quickly. But it really takes off through 2018. That's when we really start seeing the coverage. That's the end of 2018 now. Now, 2019 is kind of filling in the gaps. There's still a lot of gaps being filled in, a lot of color appearing on the map there. We're into 2020. Now, everything went wrong all over the world in 2020, but you can still see there's still quite a lot of little bits of activity here and there. And then in 2021, this year, you see the expansion out into the western side, into Remoera. So that's a kind of brief history of everything that matters in the Eastern Bays since 2017. Now, where would we be if it weren't for these community-led projects? Well, for many, many years, people have been diligently trapping and doing pest control in the parks and reserves around the area. And there's been a lot of fantastic work being done there. So here we have Cape Ann, Selwyn Bush, St. John's Bush, Tahuna Ture, Maddles Farm, Churchill Park, lots of great stuff going on. But what you'll notice is the gaps between those projects. And so the with and without map looks like that. It's kind of like the lights have gone on since 2017. Everything has, all those gaps between reserves have been joined up. And what we're going to see is that this has made a very fundamental difference to what's going on in the reserves. So I won't give away too much of the end of the story just yet, but there's good stuff to come along those lines. So that's in terms of what's been set out, the traps that have been set out. What about what has been achieved? What are the results from all of this effort? So what I'm going to show now is the catches, and I'm still showing the Eastern Bay Songbird Project along with its partners of Mission Bay Kohimarama Residents Association and the Ngāti Whātua Orake projects. And we'll just see how the catches, so this is of all pest species, rats, mice, possums, hedgehogs, and a stoat. We'll see how those catches have grown since the beginning of the project, which I'm taking to be October 2017. So there it goes. And we are now at over 4,000 predators removed from this area. That's actually quite astonishing, 4,000. If you had told me that at the beginning of the project, when I was helping to get the project set up on Catch IT, I would have been very surprised indeed. One thing that's quite interesting here is that over the last 2 years, the catch rate has been not just roughly constant, it's been extraordinarily stable. And as a statistician, I'm used to seeing data having a lot more variability than this. So I'm not really quite sure what to make of this. There's been roughly 120 catches per month over the last 2 years. Now, I'm being very speculative here, so don't take this as a conclusion, it's just a speculation. But it makes me wonder whether perhaps the trap coverage that exists is already saturating everything that is available coming into the area that's being trapped, and that it may be that what we actually need to do is identify remaining little pockets where there aren't devices, rather than necessarily filling in the gaps where there already are devices. it may be that we need to find those little reservoirs where rats and possums are still breeding and heading out into our trapping area from there. So that's just a little thought for people to consider. Perhaps we've sort of reached the rate at which we're going to make catches, and from here on, it's a question of finding where those animals are still coming into our area from. This is the heat map of all catches over the 4 years. That's about 4,400 in total. And the various different suspects are rats, by far the most catches. These numbers differ a little bit from the ones that Michelle showed, because Michelle was showing the ones that include all of the reserves as well. So I'll show you those in a moment as well. But this is just the residential and infill trapping schemes. So it's nearly 3,000 rats, 850 possums. Those are the two big ones. Mice are becoming quite a feature as well. Mice are, there were quite low numbers of mice, and I think what can happen is that as rats are removed, mice do start to become more prominent in trapping results, partly because rats actually dominate mice in getting to the traps. So mice are a bit more nervous about eating yummy food when there are rats about. So if we put all of the projects in, including the reserves and parks, this is what we get, 6,600 catches over that 4-year period. And interestingly, the Eastern Bay Songbird project by itself constitutes 56% of all that has been caught in this area over the last 4 years. So that's quite interesting. And then if we add the partner organisations as well, the partner projects, that comes to 66%. So 2/3 of what is being caught now in the Eastern Bays is due to this project and its close partners. And just to identify a few of those hotspots on the map, you can see that still it's the reserve areas and the areas of bush that are the highest catch rates. But I think we're doing a tremendous job in maintaining the pressure over the whole area so that those reserve areas are going to benefit from that. And this is the rhythm with that. And I think it's just worth reflecting on where we would be if community initiatives like this one hadn't started their meteoric rise a few years ago. We would still be just focusing on these reserves, and honestly, nothing would change, because between the reserves, there would still be all of this potential for predators to breed and then repopulate the reserves. So really, I think of Alice in Wonderland and the Red Queen. It takes all the running that you can do to stay in the same place. If you're leaving reserves just as isolates and you're not going to join the dots in between them, then you're going to keep running, but you're not actually going to get any further. And I think that's the marvelous contribution of this project and projects like it. So let's see the movie. And these are all predator catches from 2017 to the present. And it will follow a reasonably similar pattern to the trap layout that I showed earlier. So we're going to start at the end of 2017, and there's not a lot going on. But as time goes forward, we'll see what the catches that have been reported under the project and its partners have done. So let's just start that. So we're going into 2018. There are not many traps out yet, but they're starting to appear, and the catches are really starting to rise. And that Purua Valley project is taking off at that point. And then into 2019, this is where it comes into its heyday. This has really taken off. So a lot of colour has filled up that map in 2019. We're now going into the middle of 2020. And as you'll remember, a lot of strange things happen. This is lockdown time. And it does slow down. So we do see some results of that. And then into 2021, it recovered a bit, and then it's just gone a little bit quiet in the very most recent times. So it's telling a story, it's telling a social commentary story, as well as what's actually going on in terms of pests. So you'll all be interested in not just a body count. We want to know what sort of impact are we actually having. Can we measure anything that all of this hard work is actually accomplished? And it's great to see the bird count data and the weta data becoming emerging, because that's going to be the real hallmark of success, is going to be detecting changes in our natives that are coming back and repopulating due to this hard work. But there is something else we can do while we're still waiting for those results to really establish. And those of you who have been to these meetings beforehand will have seen me talking about this before. So because we've got all of these reserves and parks in our area, we actually have data going back a long time from those, as much as, I think the earliest one might be to about 2005 in Kepa Bush. So we've got years of data in some of these reserves. But in particular, we've got a lot of data from about 2015 onwards in several of the reserves in the Eastern Bays. And so what we can do is look to see whether the catches in the reserves changed in any way when the community-led projects began. So as you saw, the community project was really taking off in about 2018. So I think what we could expect is that we might see some knock-on effects in the reserves from 2019 onwards, if we're going to see any. So let's see if we can find anything out. These are the reserves that have records going back to 2015 or beforehand. So it's a reasonably good coverage of the reserves around the area. Now, what I'm going to show you is the rat catches that have taken place per trap check. So we're controlling for the amount of effort going into rat trapping. The rat catches per trap check in all of those parks, so just these ones, since 2015. And I've showed you this before in previous meetings. And that was as far as we got to at the time that you last heard the story. And that was 2019. That was the first year that we expected to see any knock-on effects. And at the time, I talked about these variability bands. You can draw these kind of lines, and they show what we would expect based on ordinary variability, based on what has happened from 2015 up to 2018. That's where you would expect the catch rates to be for 2019. But instead, it was way down there. And that is, by any measure, absolutely extraordinary. That is completely unexpected. Those of you who have any scientific training will recognize this little thing called the p-value. And basically, the smaller it is, the more impressive is your result. In other words, the further away from ordinary chance has that result gone. And if the p-value is 0, it's as small as it could possibly be. So we're basically saying that this was out of this world extraordinary. Now, I'm sure you want to know what happened after that. So what has happened from 2020 and 2021? Let's have a look. Story continues. Okay, so here we are, and it's a little bit, perhaps it's not the story you would have liked to have seen, but I would like to point out that this is still, by any standards, an extremely strong result. So that little p is still extremely small. It's way beyond the threshold for what we call scientific conclusiveness. It's in fact more than 10 times smaller than that threshold. So had we not seen that 2019 result, and if we'd only seen this, we would have been really impressed. So that's pretty good. I would not like anybody to think that it's not good. It's great, but it hasn't the same huge lead, and it would be interesting to see what happens into the future from here. What about possums? So these are the other big species that this project is targeting. Let's have a look at this. And once again, we have the story up as far as 2019, which is what you saw last time. And there it goes. And we had those ordinary bounds, and we had that tiny p. And this is what's happened to possums since then. It was already extraordinary in 2019, and it's now even more extraordinary in 2021. So I suspect that we have a lot of impact from the reserve fringe trapping that's going on in the Purua Valley and the Churchill Park areas. And those are places where possums were breeding and were repopulating the reserves year in, year out. And that concerted effort has really knocked that population down to something like way less than a quarter of what it was before. So all of this, we can't exactly equate numbers that we trap with numbers that are alive, but it is pretty indicative of something very extraordinary that's happened in the area. So it would be even more compelling if we discovered that we don't see the same results for those species that are not targeted by the infill project. And it turns out that that is also the case. So if we look at mice and hedgehogs, for example, mice are, the numbers are growing, but in terms of the number of mice that are available in the area, this is really probably a very small number. And hedgehogs, again, it's a different order of magnitude to what we're seeing from the rats and the possums. So this is what the residential and community-led projects are targeting. Sorry, these two are what the projects are targeting, whereas these two are much lesser players in the infill trapping. So what's happened with these two, mice and hedgehogs? So the mice were very interesting because back in 2019, just as we were seeing this big drop in rats, we also saw something of a rise in mice. And we were getting a little bit worried about that because does that mean that you're taking out one threat and replacing it with a different one? And it's kind of interesting, and there are far more ecologically qualified people than I am here on this call. But it's interesting to notice that the mouse trace, which is now back within its ordinary bounds after that rise, and it's kind of the mirror image of the rat trace. So what we saw with rats was that the rats had a massive decline in 2019, and then they rose, and then they rose a bit more. And we've got the mice doing the mirror image of that. And I think the ecologists out there would be maybe able to draw a few hypotheses from that. We're not concluding anything, but I think it's suggestive that there's a lot of interplay going on between rats and mice. But it's also important to notice that we've been catching a lot more mice in the infill projects still since then, since 2019. And this may be also having an impact on what's going on in the reserves. So remember, these numbers are just in the reserves. And in terms of hedgehogs, there's nothing unusual going on. They've just been bobbing along at their usual rate pretty much since 2015. So again, perhaps as the rats and possums are removed, perhaps a little bit more effort may be directed towards hedgehogs. And I think that probably what we're seeing is a big impact, especially with possums, of all this hard work that's going on. For example, this is the Porewa Valley, and you can see along the railway line, there's lots and lots of possum habitat that wasn't under any form of control until this project began. And I think year in, year out, you've got Kepa bush and Selwyn bush, so that it's Kepa bush there. And people were working very hard trapping in Kepa bush. And year in, year out, possums were breeding in this area and then pushing back in. And so it was that question of doing all the running you can to stay in the same place. And now that we've got the community-led project that's filling in all of those gaps, it's removing those reservoirs where pests can breed and they would otherwise move into the reserves from those places. My guess is that there are still a few places waiting to be found where the pests are still breeding. And I'm just speculating that that might be why we're seeing that kind of constant increase. I meant to say, when I showed the constant increase of 120 catches per month in the Eastern Bay Songbird and partner projects, that's kind of really strange when you think of how many different things have happened over that period of time. Those 2 years, we've had lots of trap handouts, so that the number of traps has increased massively. We've had lockdowns, we've had all sorts of things going on, and yet the numbers have stayed constant at about 120 per month. And I think that's very interesting. And that's what makes me wonder whether this little pocket's still waiting to be identified. So, of course, just looking in Kepa and Selwyn bush alone, when you take out all of those possums that are breeding in this area, which is what's been accomplished, then there's far fewer to trap in the reserves themselves. So this is the possum results, possum catches just for Kepa and Selwyn bush since 2015. So what does it all mean? What it means is that I think we have compelling evidence that the Eastern Bay Songbird and partners have created what we can now confirm is a sustained drop in pest numbers throughout the region. I think this is awesome progress, really impressive. And it's down to everybody's hard work. Many of you on this call have done an extraordinary job of making this come about. And I think you deserve a very impressive lockdown party for that achievement. So I thought I would finish off with something that's not such good news, and it's not the fault of any of us here, but it's something that we all need to be aware of, and it's this fellow, which is, of course, New Zealand's public enemy #1. And the bad news is that they have been invading Motutapu and Rangitoto Islands over the last 2 years, well, since early 2020. I think May 2020 was when it was first found that there was a stoat on the island. And although stoats do get to these islands from time to time, this is extraordinarily unusual that there have been at least 2 that have been trapped dead, and probably at least 2 still living on the island, and possibly even more than 2. So we're talking about 4 to 5 stoats have made their way to Rangitoto and Motutapu since May last year. And these islands they're pest-free sanctuaries, or they're meant to be. They're home to extremely precious natives such as takahe, tieke, saddleback, kiwi, and the shore plover, which is one that I'd like to mention. And yeah, this is just the chronology of the stoat captures. So we know that there were 2 in late 2020 dead, but there's the Department of Conservation is still finding droppings, so stoat scat, and the latest droppings were picked up in July. All of the droppings are sent for DNA analysis, but unfortunately, this is a very delicate job, and you get very poor quality DNA out of a dropping. So when an animal has a poop, a little bit of its own DNA is to be found in that, because it's shedding its own skin cells and so on within the droppings. So there's a tiny amount of the animal's own DNA in that. We can process that DNA in the lab, and we can try to identify how many different animals we have on the island. But the problem is that the DNA results are often very inconclusive because of such poor quality results. So that's why we're not currently sure. This was an analysis I was doing just last week. And so it's very hot off the press. We are not currently sure if we are getting DNA actively from 2 different animals, or more than 2, or just 1. But one thing we do know is that there is at least 1 stoat still alive on Motutapu, and probably more. Back in February, we're pretty sure that we had at least 2. By some miracle, all of the stoats that have been picked up have all been males, which means that at the moment we don't have a breeding population. And I don't know how many of you know about stoat biology, but female stoats you can consider to be perpetually pregnant. So female stoats, they have a unique breeding system, and baby female stoats are actually impregnated by adult males while they're still kits in the nest. And so as soon as a female stoat matures, it's already pregnant. And this means that if 1 female stoat gets to the island, we could be in real trouble. DOC has so far put in at least $250,000 to try to find these stoats and remove them. And so far it's succeeded in trapping 2. And we think there are two more. The first single stoat cost $86,000 to trap. That's a lot of money to catch 1 stoat. And this is one of our most precious species that lives on the island, the shore plover. And there are only 250 of these birds in existence. So it's almost as threatened as the kakapo. It doesn't have nearly the same press as the kakapo, but there were 10 on the island, and 3 were killed last year by stoats. So you can imagine the outcry if we lost 3 kakapo to a stoat hit. Well, something just about as bad as that is happening on the islands that are very close to us. So how do the stoats get there? And this is, of course, the big mystery. So here's Motutapu and Rangitoto, they're basically joined together. There's access from Devonport, and there's access from our area, and there's access from Howick Music Point, and that's Brown's Island there. There would potentially be access from Waiheke as well, but genetically we can tell that they're not coming from there. So we know that Waiheke is not the source. They're coming from somewhere in the Auckland mainland, and we don't know where. But they're probably the strongest suspicion is that it may well be from the Tamaki River. We are suspecting that there's been a bit of a stop-off on Browns Island, and that stoats may be swept, for example, by floodwaters, or we don't know what it is that pushes them out there, but they are strong swimmers. They can swim a long way, and once they're here, then that's where they might seek to go, because this is not really enough of a place for a stoat to live. It may well be interested in finding a bigger place. So out here in the east, we assume there are lots of stoats. We know for sure that in the Hunuas, there are lots and lots of stoats. I was tramping in the Hunuas earlier this year and just happened to meet a contractor, a trapping contractor, and he said that they'd recently put in Dock 250s, big network of Dock 250s in the Hunuas, and they had caught dozens of stoats in their earliest trapping. So I think it's very likely that out in this area, there are probably lots of stoats. Stoats range, each individual stoat will range over a huge area, and that means that every so often they will come to us. They will turn up in our patch. They're very hard to find in tracking tunnels or traps. It's really hard to know when you have a stoat that's roaming around in the Ōrākei local board. So probably they are right at the moment, but we don't have any particular sightings or monitoring results that have picked them up for a while. So this is, it's not definite, but it is a suspected mechanism that this is how they're getting to Motu Tapu. And of course, they could be coming from completely the opposite direction. But right at the moment, anything that we can do in this area to help would be really worthwhile. So this is what we've caught. Since 2018, this is all the projects, reserves and community-led, all the stoats that have been caught in the Eastern Bays since 2018. And that's how I knew what Michelle was using in her data, because there are 3 of them. One from the Eastern Bays Songbird Project and 2 others. One was Kepa Bush, that was caught in a Tim's trap in April 2018. One was caught by roadkill and reported by Julie Robson in 2019. I'm not sure if Julie was the person who ran it over or just the person who found it, but that's how we picked that one up. And one in a snappy trap in Waiotaki in March this year, which is sort of well in the danger zone for when they might have been traveling to the islands. And so what you'll notice there is that none of these catches were deliberately setting out to catch a stoat. They were all incidental catches. And indeed, 1/3 of them was completely accidental, and it wasn't even in a trap at all. It was just because it was somebody who was super alert who noticed it and reported it that we even know that that one took place. And that's what I'd like to put in a bit of a plea for today. We all need to be really vigilant for stoats. And if there are any stoat sightings, we need to actually get that data recorded so that we know where to go. So what can we do about it? Report any sightings. I'm volunteering Michelle to take them in here, so I'm sure she won't mind. But basically, as long as somebody who's going to get that data into the system is notified about it, that's what you need to do. But I'm actually going to ask for more than that. I'm going to ask for DNA samples. So it would be extremely helpful if we were able to catch stoats on this part of the mainland and send them for DNA analysis, because that will be our chance of being able to distinguish whether they're coming from here or from Devonport. We don't know for sure that we'd be able to pick up DNA differences, genetic differences between those two places, but it's possible. And at the moment, we have no stoat DNA from this part of town. So it would be really worthwhile for science, and not just for this year, but for a decade to come, even 2 decades to come, if we could start building up our knowledge of what stoat genetics look like throughout the Auckland area. So if you were, should I say, fortunate or unfortunate enough to find a stoat in a trap, my request is, and this is not very nice, I'm sorry, but please, could you cut off the tail as soon as you can. It just needs to be, let's say, about 10 centimeters of tail, but it needs to be actual tissue, not just fur. It needs to be actual meaty bit, if you like, tissue. Cut it off while the animal is as fresh as you possibly can make it. So please don't just sort of go home and think, oh, I'll take it. I'll take a snip when I go back again next week. Please let someone know. And there are people who would be willing to actually make a special trip out just to cut off a stoat tail if you tell them where it is. So just make sure it's done as quickly as possible, because otherwise the DNA starts to deteriorate and we won't necessarily get anything useful from it. If you are good at finding stoat scat, or if you have a super dog in your possession, this is what it looks like. And even if you suspect that it's stoat scat, we can possibly get DNA out of that scat if it's fresh. So again, as quickly as you can, if you could put it in a bag, label where it came from, and in both cases, if you could freeze that sample in your home freezer as quickly as you can, that will help to stop the DNA from deteriorating until it's got into a proper lab storage facility. So that's everything I wanted to say. It's ending on a note where it's real conservation management in action. And what I found through this procedure is that Department of Conservation have been in touch with me because they want me to do genetic analysis. But it's just because of my link with Catch IT that I happen to know that there are all of these people who would be willing to put in serious effort to help this problem that are right in the zone where those stoats might be leaving from. And so it's something that not only do we need to join the dots in terms of putting traps everywhere throughout the city, but we also need to join the dots in terms of people, because often we've got all this enormous community effort, and we actually need that to feed through to what agencies like DOC and Council are doing. And all too often at the moment, there's actually not that link. So the link has been established just by chance on this occasion. And we are underway with initiatives to collect stoats and also Norway rats at the same time from throughout the Auckland area for the sake of the islands. And that initiative's being spearheaded by Auckland Council Rangers. So lots for us to do. And just remains for me to say thank you so much and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was absolutely fascinating. I can see from the stream of comments coming in that you've triggered a lot of interest from everybody who's online at the moment. And on the subject of the stoats, I can say earlier this year when we first came to hear about the situation on Motatapu, some of us in the group talked, and I know that Edward especially was paid attention to the potential for the Tamaki estuary as a source of it. So we do have some DOC 200 stoat traps, a limited number in our possession in our area. And my memory is, Edward, correct me if I'm wrong, that you've positioned them to the coastal area where they could be facing towards the Tamaki estuary in the area that we're working. He's nodding his head there. So anyway, rest assured we took some action at the time, but if we can possibly find some, as you put it, scat and the stoke tails to keep your genetic analysis happy, we'd like to try and eradicate them as well if we come across them. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you once again, Rachel. I really wish we could have done this face to face in the Araki Community Hall as we originally planned, but this is the best we can do in the circumstances. But your presentation was equally compelling via Zoom as it would be on the big screen. So thank you so much for supporting our group with this really detailed, in-depth analysis of our history and our data in the whole area. And I think it gives a lot of us who are buried in the details of things, that gives us that big, far away perspective of the big picture of what's happening in the area of the long term. And that's not easy to achieve by any other means other than what you can give us. So thanks for that, Rachel.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining from all over the place. I see Mary's there. And thank you for all your support in various forms over the year, and I look forward to another even more detailed and expansive year to come. So I think we'll wrap for the night, unless anyone's got any questions or anything they'd like to speak about. No? Kit's waving goodbye, I think. Okay, right, we'll call it good night then. So thanks everybody for joining our AGM.